Hello, everyone. It's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. In this video, I wanted to go over the highlights of this podcast from a podcast called A Climate Change with Matt Mattern. It's episode 92. He interviews Steve Fambro, and it was released on January 9th. I will put a link to the entire podcast in the description below. I definitely recommend you check it out. There's actually a lot of new information here that they talk about. So I wanted to go over the highlights of that, but I recommend you check out the entire podcast, and the link will be in the description below. All right. So in the first part of this highlight, I wanted to talk about this clip where Steve Fambro says that it sounds like they are going to be licensing out the solar panel technology to other companies. So this is like another source of revenue for the company. This is similar to what Sono Motors was doing.
Yes, the solar cells are going to get more efficient. We're also going to have different models with different amount of surface area, and we're also working with some other companies to commercialize sort of a fledgling solar mobility business, leveraging our technology for other customers and looking to monetize that. So it's not just our vehicle, it's other vehicles, it's other applications that our solar can really help lower the impact of electric vehicles on the grid. By doing this, we're able to deploy lots of electric vehicles and electrify lots of things without necessarily having to worry about bringing the grid along to modern standards. Sure, we need a modern grid, of course, but not having it is not a reason to wait on electrification.
Okay, so remember, Sono Motors has a solar panel technology that they're already selling to like bus companies and other things like that. And that part of their business is doing well. And their advisors told them to give up on the car and just focus on the solar panel business and licensing out their solar panel technology to other vehicle companies like, buses and taxis and things like that. And it sounds like Aptera plans on doing the same thing and licensing that as a second revenue stream other than their car, which is, I think, a wise idea. I don't, we'll have to see what the benefits of their technology versus Sono's technology versus Lightyear's technology is. Ideally, the thing that's the most robust and is the easiest to manufacture, that's the thing that's going to win out in terms of the solar tech. And it's maybe that Aptera's is just perfectly designed for their vehicle. It may be not as applicable to other vehicles. Like if you want to put it on a bus, you just want a flat, you just need a flat panel. So you don't really need the curvature as much. So maybe like Sono's is easier to manufacture. But if Aptera's is easier to manufacture, then it would be good. Okay, so the next part of this, talking a little bit about the finance, which is sort of the most important thing at this point.
Elon Musk, I think, said he called his factories money furnaces or something like that. We're not at that stage yet. I don't think we ever will be because our vehicle is fundamentally different than a car. A typical car body, or body in white as it's called, has 200 structural pieces that all have to be fixtured and welded together and held dimensionally constant during that process. Our structure has 6 pieces. So fundamentally, we're just clicking 6 pieces together as opposed to trying to hold 200 pieces together and keep them aligned. So our development time for the body is shorter. Our assembly line cost is less. Our tooling cost is less. Everything is different because of what we call the new steel, the pressed carbon. You don't have any labor in this part. You're not having to put fiber in the thing. You basically just put a block of carbon paste in the mold. It squeezes shut with 5,000 tons force, add some heat, and 3 minutes later, a structural part comes out ready to use. So fundamentally, our costs are different because they're lower because we have fewer parts and fewer tools. That said, to date, we've raised about $100 million, and that $100 million has let us develop the vehicle from scratch with all the other attendant technologies, sort of the solar, as I mentioned, the solar electronics, the battery. We made an acquisition last year of a company that makes displays and the software because they did a much better job than we could.
So he's talking about Andromeda right there.
And we've been able to do all of that on less than $100 million. To get to production, we're out in a Series B raise right now for $150 million. And we've got folks.
So that's a different number than previously quoted. They were saying they need $50 million. So I don't know if he's saying that they have a Series B raise to raise potentially $150 million, or that they need $150 million to make it to production. Now, I suspect, this is my guess, is that they need 50 million to make it to production, and their Series B raise is for 150 million. So that's kind of the maximum raise that they're going to try to get. And if they get that, that's even better. But what they need is 50. That's my take on this.
Folks in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, in Europe and the United States that we're talking to that all want to be a part of this.
So it does look like they're talking to some big investors in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the United States, and hopefully those pan out. So we really need those investors to pan out. And from what they're talking about, it kind of sounds like they're private investors in those areas, not necessarily like the government of Saudi Arabia or the government of UAE or the government of the United States. These are private individuals in those companies, in those countries. Okay, and then there's some interesting points about like some other investment sources that he talks about.
Yeah, we've. I'm not sure what I could talk about publicly, but we've got, I would say, a significant investment from a strategic supplier, and we also have the public California CEC grant for $21 million that we applied for. It was a competition, and we were one of several companies awarded that kind of grant. So that's a matching grant, essentially. So every dollar that we spend, they give us $1 back. So it's already a big chunk of the raise that's been helped, by these two investments. But I think if we can keep our fundraising on schedule, and I don't see why we can't, we should be able to get the vehicle into production, go through all of our validation, crash testing, everything next year, and hopefully out to the market.
Okay, so the interesting thing was he was saying that this is kind of a new investment we were not aware of before, but that one of their strategic suppliers has put in a fairly large investment to them. I highly suspect that the strategic supplier is CPC Group. That's my guess. If you guys think differently, let me know in the comments below who you think the strategic supplier that has a large investment with them is. And you'll see why I think it is CPC Group as this interview continues. All right, and then in this next segment, Steve talks about sort of the philosophy of their engineering at Aptera, which is something we're all familiar with and we agree with, but it's kind of good to hear him articulate it.
The EV truck wars, I don't think, is where the environment needs to go. We don't need mining batteries has a cost. There's an environmental cost with everything that humans do. So we have to be mindful of it. And steering the technology to use fewer and fewer resources is really how engineering has been done, electrical engineering especially. Transistors get more efficient, they get smaller. That's the natural progress of things. So to see, 10,000 pound vehicles full of batteries just so they look like a regular truck or SUV that people are used to, I don't think this is the way. I don't think this is sustainable. It's going to require extraordinary amounts of power to be brought to different charging locations. It's going to take a long time to charge. It's going to use a lot of batteries. It feels like the wrong direction to us. And so that's why we're going in the opposite direction, or a direction that uses fewer resources, that uses them wisely. It stretches them out over a really long distance and gives a customer, I think, a really good value.
And then, okay, in this next segment, Steve talks about why CPC Group is working with Aptera when they were previously just doing kind of small batch supercar parts.
CPC has been growing their business. It's one of these quiet companies that people haven't heard about. And I joke every time we go back there's a new building. There's a new campus, something is new and bigger and better about them. They just completed a 12-story tower, which is now the new office. They do supercars well, and it's made them a lot of money, and it's a great segment that has grown them to where they are. But they are looking at companies like Aptera or Tesla and seeing this growth in electric vehicles, and they're saying, wait a minute, electric vehicles really have to be mindful of weight. Because they're all trying to lightweight. They're making structures out of aluminum. They're starting to use composites, and they're saying we've been doing that all along. So we want to go after this new industry, and our technology. I'm using CPC's voice. CPC's technology gives them the ability to scale at really high volumes, unlike composites has been able to do so in the past. And so the relationship between Aptera and CPC lets them really demonstrate that at scale. They can talk about it all day long, but if they can produce an affordable electric vehicle that's extremely lightweight, that is indicative of the process or representative of the process that they would use to do other vehicles for other companies, that's what they're also trying to achieve. They're going to have a lot of business with Aptera, and they're going to make a lot of money with Aptera. But they're also looking, beyond who are the other companies that they can continue to grow their business with, even higher volumes. Aptera, even at 40,000 units a year, is still low volume compared to Detroit standards. There's lots of vendors in Detroit that wouldn't even take meetings with us because our volumes are just too low. They don't do anything below 100,000 a year. So that's another reason why we ended up going to Italy, is there is this ecosystem of suppliers whose volumes are right around our sweet spot. Their sweet spot is right around our volumes, I should say. But CPC is instrumental in that because there's nobody else in the world that can do high volume automotive composites the way they do. These parts have fasteners that are built in them. They come out ready to be covered with a vinyl wrap. They don't have to be treated or sanded or polished or anything. They are really, I would say, their tribal knowledge and their trade secrets and whatever other IP they have let them make these automotive parts in a way that nobody else in the world, from my knowledge and my research, can do.
That's pretty. Okay, so that's very interesting. There's a lot of stuff in there. It appears that what CPC is trying to do is they realize that they have this product, the CFSMC, that can be mass produced. It's very light, it's very strong, and it works very well in that you don't have to do any finishing on the product before you use it. And they're trying to move, they realize that EVs are becoming a thing, and for EVs, being lightweight helps with their efficiency and their range, which a lot of people care about. And so it sounds like they're trying to find an EV manufacturer that's not super high volume, so it's a little bit less risk to them, but then they can demonstrate like, hey, this works. And then so if Aptera is successful, then CPC can point to Aptera and say, see, we worked with these guys and it worked out well. You should use us too. And they're hoping that some of the bigger automotive players that have much larger volumes are going to switch over to them and use their thing. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial relationship between two. The other thing that I heard in there that I was a little disappointed about was he said that you can do the vinyl wrap directly without any finishing. So the not having to finish the product, that's great news. But the vinyl wrap was disappointing because he definitely said vinyl wrap. Before they said wrap, and we weren't sure, was it vinyl wrap or was it PPF? And for various reasons, it appears that PPF is probably the superior route in terms of longevity. And I have a video on that. But it looks like they're thinking vinyl wrap, which doesn't have the longevity that PPF has, especially if you're going to leave it out in the sun. I'll definitely have to talk to them about that and see why they're going to vinyl wrap over PPF. But that was a little disappointing. Okay, so this next segment is probably the most new information dense part of the segment. And here Steve talks about how many employees they have, and we find out some other cool things.
Here in the U.S., we have about 100 folks under our roof between our two our solar facility just a couple miles down the road and here at the headquarters. Overseas, mostly in Italy, we have probably another 20 to 30 people, maybe 50 or so through various vendors that we're working.
So it appears that most of a large proportion of their supply chain now is coming through Italy. So Italy is producing a lot of their parts, and they have between 30 and 50 Aptera employees through the various, working with the various suppliers in Italy, with the vast majority of them, about 30 of them working at CPC Group.
With so suspension, lighting, aluminum castings, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so suspension, lighting, aluminum castings, that's all being done in Italy. The suppliers are all in Italy, it looks like. We were thinking that those suppliers would be more stateside, but it looks like it's mostly an Italian supply chain.
To get the vehicle in production, the team in Italy will grow by about 30 folks. And our team here will grow a little bit less than that for the final assembly because we're going to be doing the body assembly in Italy first and shipping the bodies over here, probably with.
Okay, so that's the new thing that I didn't realize. They are, and this makes the video where Jason Hill was with CPC Group, that makes more sense because they were saying they were going to build the Aptera there. And I was like, do they mean they're going to build some test beds there? What do they mean? It looks like they're actually building a large proportion of the vehicle in Italy. And so, and they're shipped. So, at first we thought, okay, CPC Group is going to make these body panels and you can nest them. So you could pack a bunch of them. You could probably pack hundreds of them in a container ship, in a large container, because they could all nest together. But they're going to actually build complete bodies and then ship them over. So that's a totally new thing.
The suspension and wheels on it, where we'll put on the glass, we'll put on the solar panels and that kind of thing. That final balance of what we're going to do in Italy versus what we're doing in California hasn't been decided yet. But our original plan had us only hiring about 40 people for the factory here. It's going to be a little bit less than that. At a 12-minute tack time and 40 vehicles a day, it's just, there's not a lot of people that are needed. Most of the engineering will increase for validation, testing, etc. Some of that will be outsourced through our partners that do that kind of work, Roush, etc. But some of those engineers will be full-time in-house. So you're probably going to see that climb up to about 300. And if you tell that to anyone in the automotive or startup electric vehicle industry, they'll laugh. They'll say, "There's no way you can do it without, it's so small." But again, we're not building a traditional car. We're building a much simpler vehicle. It has fewer parts. A lot of our partners are validating these various systems for us. So there's much less work that we have to do than a typical company who says, I don't want to. There's other EV companies who maybe they've hired thousands, tens of thousands of people to do all of these tasks in-house. We just don't have to do that. We have competent partners that can do that, some of that stuff better than we can, and we leverage that.
All right, so very interesting. Because the light, suspension, aluminum castings, and the body are being done in Italy, they're for sure going to put those parts together. So you're going to have a vehicle, and they're probably going to put the motors on the vehicles too, because those are coming from Alafe in Slovenia, which is much closer to Italy. So I suspect suspension, motors, and like the castings and stuff are going to be, the main body and chassis are going to be assembled in Italy, and maybe more. But then they're going to ship over. What's definitely happening in San Diego is like the solar panels and the glass and probably the interior bits. Not sure where the battery is going to come into the picture, but it looks like the major body and structural parts are going to be made in Italy and shipped whole to the United States. And then in San Diego, they're going to need less workers. And it sounds like they're going to have a total employee number of employees at around 300, which is from what Steve says, a very, very lean operation, which is good, which would bring down costs and make hopefully the Aptera, stay affordable, so they don't have to raise the prices of it too much. All right, and so in this last part, Steve talks about their kind of goals for this year, and how much tooling is going to cost, things like that.
Big milestones, I would say, are wrap up our Series B fundraising, begin kicking off some of the high expense tools, both for the body and the motor. We've got to get in the order queue for some of the battery welding robots. So we've closed a round of funding. We can make all those orders, and then start getting body panels off the tools about mid-year to July, maybe. And then once we're getting body panels off of the tools, we will have already had our castings and all that other stuff done. We can start testing the vehicle, sort of privately, not in the public, but you're doing the brake validation, crash testing, that kind of thing, because we'll have a manufacturing representative product, structure, body that's made off of production tools, made with production processes, and that's what we can characterize and validate. So I would say wrap up the Series B, place the big purchase orders that we're waiting to do, and then start getting body panels off the tooling about mid-year, July, sometime that time frame, so that we can start doing some of the final validation.
All right, so that's their timeline. And this is, again, obviously a best case scenario timeline. Best case scenario timeline is they get the funding soon, and then they get the body parts coming off in July, August. Then they can start building for validation and crash testing. And then, hopefully the first production vehicles by the end of the year or early next year. So that's kind of best case scenario, which I think is accurate. And so I don't think anything ever goes quite as planned. So I don't think we're going to see production vehicles in 2023. We're probably going to have to wait until 2024. But the cool thing that we found out is how most of their supply chain is Italian, and much of the assembly is going to happen at CPC Group. And then we kind of know their timeline. And unfortunately, it does seem like final wrap. All right, so tell me what you guys think about the information that we found out. There's a lot of cool information in this podcast. Go check out the full podcast for even more stuff. And thanks for watching, guys. Thanks as always to our supporting members, and have a great day, everyone.